Hey everybody, it's David with No Chaser, and for today's topic, I'm going to talk about just the trials and tribulations of early recovery in the sense of feeling overwhelmed. So, I'm going through early recovery myself, and there's there's a lot you deal with. So, first off, you deal with the detox, which is, withdrawals, and depending on what your drink or drug of choice was, or rather, if you drank, they can be pretty brutal. I won't really get into that. If you've ever experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. It's can be very harrowing, and for some people, it can actually be a positive because I've known a lot of people who have used the memories of the withdrawals to stay sober in the future, which is use any negative reinforcement that you can, use any reinforcement that you can. The second part is you've gotten out of the detox, you're kind of clear and free as far as like some of the physical stuff. Maybe not completely. You could still have the shakes a little bit afterwards. I've talked about post-acute withdrawal syndrome before. If not, you can check out my video on that. That's post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And so you can still have the shakes, sometimes the lack of balance. And then, you can also, I know with people that do meth that they sleep, they crash for their initial withdrawals, just sleep like a dead body. But then in the upcoming, weeks, they could have immense trouble sleeping. And, that's the same thing with alcohol. You can have insomnia, you can have, deal with some of these things where it's hard to sleep, eating can be hard. It just, a lot of it depends on, the damage that's done or how your body's reacted to it. But I'm talking more about when you get past that stage and you're trying to reacclimate with life. You're trying to get back to a place where you can start maybe I don't want to say fix yourself, but kind of fixing things, getting back in order, whether it's getting back in work or getting back to the household or with your kids or family, whether it's just starting over completely. You can find yourself in a halfway house, or you can find yourself just somewhere else, maybe the kind of the crash and burn from your latest bender or binge or something caused a sort of temporary or final separation between your spouse. I mean, there's just a lot going on because there was all that stuff that was built up in your life from when you were drinking or using. And so, what kind of occurs is that you have this backlog of stuff, all this so-called debt that you've acquired, and you have to deal with it soberly. And you have to deal with, the other thing is too, is that what makes it feel overwhelming is that you have all these emotions that are coming back. You have true sort of sadness, you have true anger, you could be emotionally sensitive, irritable. And the thing is that you can also feel a lot of pressure and a lot of stress because, before being on drugs or alcohol, it just kind of numbed these things. It kind of pushed them away. I mean, that was the, kind of the appeal of it, right? Is that you're able to take these kind of emotions and feelings and all this stress, and it would temporarily make it go away. You could kind of escape chemically for some time being. But then it all comes back, and now you don't have that little thing that helps you escape. You have to deal with it sort of head on. And you don't have to deal with it alone. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that you can deal with it with the support of others, but then, it becomes hard to use the support of others because, they talk about like the 300-pound phone, or how hard it is to call people to reach out for help. If you're not used to asking for help, if you, like me, I struggle sometimes with trusting that people will be able to help me. I know it's just this stupid sort of trust issues that I've always had with, and it's something that I need to work on, especially now, back to early recovery myself. And there's that stuff that needs to be utilized. I always said that there's so many problems in my life where I just wish I had more resources. Problems financially, problems career-wise. I wish I had more resources, more support, whatever, medical problems, like what you name it. All these problems in life where I would be begging for more support and resources. But the biggest issue that had been plaguing my life, still plagues my life, is, alcoholism and addiction. That big issue, I have all the resources kind of in the world. Not all the resources in the world, but I have plenty of resources. I have support I can reach out to, and yet I feel so reticent to using it. I don't know if it's, like I said, I think a lot of it has to do with just worry about trust that people will be able to help me. Also being vulnerable, because I find myself where I can be very candid and I can be very honest about things retroactively. I think that's one of the biggest struggles I've dealt with, is that I haven't been able to, if I'm in a wave of depression, or if I'm really feeling craving, or if I'm really struggling with something, is that in that moment getting help and talking about it, just in the moment talking about it, because when you do it retroactively, you're in a different headspace. It's a little bit easier to get into the details, and you can describe how you were feeling and not feeling it then. But to do it in the moment is so much more different, because you're truly vulnerable at that time. You're fragile and you're asking for help. And I know some people struggle with, just a sense of pride, not wanting to ask for help. It could be a multitude of reasons, but that's one of those things where it just, I know that I have to utilize that to get through this time in early recovery. And one thing that I've always said is that as a person, if you relapse constantly, like after a month or maybe a couple months, or maybe a couple of weeks, or all of the above, that I struggled with for a really long time in just these short periods, is that you're doing the hard part over and over again, going through the detox, going through the initial emotional and mental sort of turmoil of early recovery, going through all those steps of rebuilding your life and trying to make some amends that you can at the time, trying to fix things, dealing with conflicts that you probably created. One thing I learned is that so many of the problems in my life are self-created. I experience problems just like anybody, problems with healthcare, problems with, career, problems with other things. But the really big problems, the things that keep me up at night, are the things that I know that I created. And to get back on track is to initially just stop doing that, stop creating issues, stop creating these little fires that I have to put out. And then to try to sort of, as they say, make amends for things. But usually people that work the 12 steps, that's a little bit down the road. There's some amends you can make maybe quickly. For me, and for a lot of people, people in your life just want you to be you. They want you to get back to whatever the normal you was. And one thing that I realized is that, I started drinking and doing stuff when I was about 13. First time I drank was 12, but I didn't really do much at that time. Didn't really do it addictively. It was just few and far between. And then I got addicted to opiates when I was 15. And then as I went through that, and I thought that was just going to be a bad phase in my life, then it was like, no, we're just getting started. So then the drinking came along, and throughout my 20s, all the way into my 30s, now halfway into my 30s, and I try to think of myself as people want the old David back, or I wish I could go back to the old David, and I don't really think there was an old David to really speak of, because I started so young. And I know other people deal with this too, where they go, wait, what me am I going back to? The 14-year-old me? I don't want to go back to that person, but I have to create a new person. And this is one of the biggest things in early recovery that you may have to face, is that you don't really know who you are. You don't really know what your potential is, what your pitfalls are soberly. You don't really know, not just, you may have ideas of the person you want to be, but just in a sense, like I say, who you are as a person. And you have to find out all these things sober, and you have to find them out with all the emotions that come with it. And it's incredibly difficult. To find yourself at the age of 35, to find yourself maybe at the age of 40, to find yourself maybe at the age of 50, 60, whenever you get sober, if you've, I learned some things about myself when I had long-term sobriety. I kind of grew in a sort of sense, but, falling back to it, it still feels like I'm figuring out who the heck I am. I'm trying not to cuss on YouTube, which is lame, but who the heck I am. But I really am, in a sense. I still, wonder at night, who am I? And then sometimes I think to myself, it's just that's not important right now. It is important to learn about yourself and to become who you are, but maybe it's just a process where you go through, you get better, and you just try to be a good person, and then your natural personality, your natural, who you are as an individual springs forth from that. That's kind of my hope, because I'm not, I'm just right now, like most people in early recovery, I'm trying not to drink. I'm trying not to use, and I'm focused on just getting healthy again and dealing with life when I don't have, the thing that could relieve it or that brought that temporary escape. I don't want to glorify it and be like, oh, it was so masterful and awesome, because even I got to a point where the drinking didn't even work that well. Like, the temporary became even smaller and more fleeting, and all the crap that came, with it, as far as like the bad feelings that come with drinking, even while you're intoxicated, were starting to come more and more. And basically, it was just sort of a raw deal. And this sort of sense of like finding out who I am, dealing with life soberly, dealing with all these emotions, it's difficult work. And I know the remedy is to follow the things that I know have worked, try to learn new things that work, and also use the help that's provided to me. Use as much as I can. So I've been trying to do that a lot more. I've tried it in the past and it's worked for some time, but I know I need to use it in a more long-term way, to where even if I, get out of some of the earlier months of sobriety, that it has to be not just a thing I do, not just a break in a case of emergency, but something that I do consistently throughout my life. And that's something that really has to be learned and practiced, and that could be, incredibly difficult. So on that fun note, it's all worth it, though. As much as it's difficult as it can be, I always have to remember how worth it is to do all this stuff, no matter how hard or confusing or just stressful it can be. It's all worth it, because the alternative is no way to live whatsoever. So if you're struggling, my heart goes out to you. If you're new in early recovery, hey, so am I. I'm trying to figure this stuff out. And if you're just watching because you're interested, or if you have long-term recovery, that's awesome. Other than that, be well.